اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا فعلمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Welcome everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're watching from. Let me take this opportunity to welcome our guest, who you all know, Sheikh Kassim Kaira, broadcasting live from the BBC. Sewa Sheikh, can you say salam to everyone?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you all out there. And thank you very much for joining us for this short 1 hour session. Now,
MashaAllah. Thank you very much. Well, that was just for a confirmation, because people might think you're not actually there. People fear technology these days. Yeah, we're here once again with a wonderful topic, Muslims in diplomacy. Last week we discussed Muslims and politics, and we were celebrating quite a number of issues, number of things, which included the fact that this time we've had Muslim numbers uh, growing higher in the house, and that was something great. We continued that debate on 75 W Radio with Sheikh Kassim Kaida, still looking at the Muslim MPs and the responsibilities. We had that wonderful talk. I encourage everyone to follow that show. Sheikh Kassim Kaida will say something small about it before we start.
oh, thank you very much. It's a show that runs every Tuesday, sometimes a bit late for people in Uganda, but for something that you like, I think you can stay up. It's called Come, Let's Talk with me, Kasim Kaira. And it does stream on Facebook as well as on Zoom. And it's a program that it's a general program. It looks at politics, social issues, economic issues, faith issues. No subject is out of boundaries, with the exception that the difference is we do have a lot of dissent. So we do not allow, for example, abusive language. You can disagree, but disagreeing respectfully. And that's the thing about the program. But also the difference with the program is also it's a discussion program. So it's about you, the people viewing. You actually take charge of the program. It's not about getting someone to come and talk to people. It's about people having a discussion amongst themselves. And I think that's the wealth of that particular program, because it allows people from all the different walks of life to sort of share views in those normally 2 hour sessions that sometimes run over simply because the topics sometimes get very exciting. And
Yeah, I remember it got very, very exciting.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah,
So it runs on 75W Radio on Facebook, so you can always get slots of that, but also on my own Facebook page.
yeah. Thank you very much. That is a program that we all follow, and many of our discussions here are definitely better discussions even there. So just for you to know and for you to understand that it is also your platform to follow. Now today, Sheikh Kassim Kaira, we are looking at the Muslims in diplomacy, because as we prepare to enter a new government, a 5-year term, I don't know what will happen, because the opposition is saying it will have to go to court and whatever. But let us assume this is the government that we have. We are looking at the diplomatic positions, and the word diplomacy, I don't know, or ambassador or something. In Arabic, it is safir, and for some reason, in the word safir, there is safara. There is a word that uh, kind of gives that meaning of someone having to move from one place to another on behalf of the other, representing a particular group of people, a nation, or something. And it is not really a new thing. I believe Sheikh Kassim Kaira, being a historian, will say more about that. But it is not a new thing to the Muslim tradition. It has been there.
And that is where I really, really wanted to start, to show that
Yeah,
Islam and diplomacy have always moved hand in hand. And I think that's part of the beauty of Islam, that quite often we see Islam through the eyes of just worship, coming and praying and fasting and doing
yeah,
Hajj, but then you forget the bigger aspects that actually Islam, involves. When the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam received his messengership, the first few months, of course, Allah had limited him on the verse of وَانذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, to concentrate on, first of all, his close families. Because whenever you have relatives or relations or close people who resist your particular message, It becomes very difficult to convince an outsider when from within your own household you've not got support. And we have seen it with previous prophets. Prophet Noah, despite 950 years of preaching of his messageship, he failed. His own children failed him, when it even came to the point of boarding Noah's ark. His
Mhm.
own son refused to board, the ship, the ark. And then you see, for example, in Prophet Lut, his own wife, became part of the problem, inviting the people that were coming to cause havoc in Sodom and Gomorrah. And because of all this, it becomes very important that a prophet receives support from within their own household. So it is very, very essential. So it was really absolutely essential that the prophet would start his mission, essentially establishing support. And you could see that the first woman to become a Muslim was Khadija radiallahu anha, his wife.
Radiallahu
The
anhu.
first young man to become a Muslim was Ali radiallahu anhu. The first man to become a Muslim was Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, his best friend. So if you cannot gather the very support, I mean, we've had situations where people have gone into elections and someone comes up with one vote and you wonder their family came in and whatever, how comes even their families didn't vote for them? It's quite surprising because it just means their own vote is the only vote they received. So you need to, first of all, build support within your own household. And the Prophet existed on this particular verse of, first of all, including his own people. And the idea was within the first 4 months of his mission, the target was to look for 200 people who would convert to Islam and use this as the nucleus that would constitute now the mission that became Islam. When the Prophet, after he had accomplished this, especially after the visit to Taif, the Prophet ﷺ now comes in and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands him now to start spreading the message, widely. That's how he invites the people of Makkah on a mountain and he calls on people. He says, oh, people of Makkah, if I was to say to you that there was an enemy coming from behind this hill, this mountain, would you believe me? And people said, Muhammad, we have never known you to be a liar and therefore we would believe you. And after giving all these examples, he goes to say, I'm a prophet of Allah sent amongst you. Of course, that's when his own uncle, one of his many uncles, Abu Lahab, comes out, stands out, and shouts and says, is this really the nonsense that you called and stopped us from working to come and listen to this trash? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, then revealed Surah Abu Lahab that many people, or Surah Lahab that many people recite. Tabbat yada Abi Lahabin wa tabba. If you've been reciting that particular verse, you would know. But beyond this, now, after the Prophet had gone public with his message, the next thing that became in, and actually that's where diplomacy and Islam starts immediately.
Mhm.
You see the Prophet ﷺ writing letters to kings. Wrote a letter to the king of Sham, of Syria. He wrote a letter to the king of Persia. He wrote a letter to the king of Egypt. And all of these were sort of very powerful kings that were existing at that time. And the Prophet ﷺ was inviting them to Islam. Of course, we have known what happened to some of the emissaries that were sent because diplomacy started from there. You never kill a messenger. If you kill an ambassador, for example, that's the worst that can happen in diplomacy. Whatever
Mhm.
happens, even to the very worst situation, an ambassador would be protected, would be given protection. An embassy, and that's why you find it very interesting that an
Mhm.
embassy in a country, despite being on the land of that country, where an embassy is built, becomes the other country. So, in other words, American embassy in Uganda is American territory. If you manage to enter there, you are not in Uganda, you are in the United States of America. If you're in
Right.
UK and you enter the Ugandan embassy, the British government cannot get you without the cooperation of the Uganda government, because then that is Ugandan territory. That goes to show the idea of diplomacy. From an Islamic perspective, the Prophet ﷺ sends out emissaries with letters calling people to come to Islam. Some
Mhm.
of the ambassadors were killed, and for those that were killed, Rasul said, may Allah
Sallallahu alaihi
subhanahu wa
wasallam.
ta'ala tear your empire like you have torn this letter. And the message was very clear. My name is Muhammad Sallallahu I'm prophet of Allah, and I invite you to the word of Allah. I invite you to Islam. Some kings were very clever, like the king of Egypt, and you see the way that Islam entered into Egypt was, a conquest, but a conquest that was bloodless, nearly bloodless, because the king of Egypt at that time, actually what he did, he said, I've received your message, I'll be considering that message, but you know what? I'm sending you a gift. And that's where they sent a woman, Maria, to Qibtiyya. That is diplomacy within Islam.
Yeah.
So diplomacy in itself is not a new thing at all. We've had diplomacy. Before the Prophet died,
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
during the time of his mission, he receives a group of Christians, who had come. I think it's from Najran. They arrived from Najran, a group of Christians who came to meet with the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to listen
Sallallahu
to
alaihi
him.
wasallam.
They were hosted in a mosque. These are some of the things that I never spoken about. They were hosted inside the mosque. They spent their night there. And the Prophet ﷺ allowed them to pray their prayers, not Islamic prayers, their prayers within the mosque. Yet you will know that there would have been taboos surrounding that. But this goes into the essence of a guest, of a visitor, and diplomacy. So for Muslims, diplomacy is not a new phenomenon. It is something that has lived around us. Importantly also to mention on diplomacy, when Muslims got persecuted 3 years into the mission of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam encourages the first group of Muslims, 212 of them, to migrate to go to Abyssinia or Habash or Ethiopia, present-day Ethiopia. When they ran and escaped to Ethiopia because they were facing serious persecution and they didn't have a lot of family support or clan support from within Mecca, when they got to Ethiopia and they were received by the king Najash, what follows is the Quraysh send a delegation to go and make sure that these Muslims are brought back. Again, diplomacy works. If you look at the manner in which Jafar stood on behalf of the Muslims, spoke, already diplomacy was beginning to work. I think, therefore, it just establishes the fact that Muslims are not new to diplomacy, and it would be just a very, very opportune moment, especially now going into the next 5 years, to consider, especially when it comes to appointments, where there has been a very big mistake in Uganda, and to this I can say without a fear of controversy, that the president of Uganda has been so naive when it came to appointment of ambassadors to Arab countries. It would never be thought, for example, that he could ever send a Muslim to Rome to go and represent, Uganda at the papacy in Rome. That would never happen. Why would you send a non-Muslim to a Muslim country? And it's not about being racist or whatever, but there are particular things that were, because when you send an ambassador, you want an ambassador to go and represent the interests of that country in that new country where you've sent them. A person will get easily an ear. A person who is a Muslim who will go to the mosque with the likelihood of praying in the same mosque with the Amir will have a bigger likelihood of having a conversation that will end up bringing business people into Uganda to invest than a person who will have to make an appointment and they have to find them a day that would not be inconvenient to the Amir.
Great,
So
great.
these are things that now, going into the next 5 years, yes, mistakes have been committed in the past. It's never too late. These could be corrected, and you never know when the time is right. Find Muslims to go into those Arab countries. There was a particular incident that actually was very powerful. One of the Muslims who was appointed as ambassador to Qatar, Dr. Rashid Semud, my OB, my
Yeah.
classmate, my desk mate, actually, and a very big
I remember you were
competition.
arguing who is older.
Something happened that
Yeah.
was very interesting. When he was posted and he went to meet the Emir of Qatar and even the Emir of Bahrain, when he gets there and he speaks Arabic, the Emir was just in shock because when they set the appointment, he thought, the person he was going to meet, the person from Uganda, they even found a translator to come and do the translation. The translator ended up with no work because he got there, he spoke in this eloquence of Arabic that the Amir was so happy. I mean, he had dedicated 15 minutes of a meeting. It ended up taking up to 1 hour and a half for an Amir to dedicate 1 hour and a half to an ambassador, a mere ambassador. That was a very strong statement. Now, these
Yeah.
are things that benefit countries because from discussions like that, what you're trying to do is market the country. All of us who are out of Uganda as ambassadors. What we do where we are at represents the image of Uganda. If you
Yep.
do this and they will follow, they can say you're a British citizen, but when you are in trouble, they always go back to where you came from. They say a Ugandan born, and so it starts coming in. Yet when you're doing serious
Yeah.
good things, they will say
Yeah.
British citizen. But if there are problems that you have done, then it goes back to the country that you came from. So an ambassador in appointments, these are considerations that must be made. There have been mistakes in the past. This can be corrected going next to the next 5 years, inshallah, and even after. But it also has to start with the Muslims, Sheikh Ashraf, because the Muslims themselves have to show that they've built up the capacity to be able to hold fort, to
Yeah,
be able not only to be
that
diplomatic.
that was my very next question, Sheikh Kaida,
Mhm.
because it is
Yeah.
important to advocate for that. But what does it
Mhm.
take to become an ambassador? What kind of preparation? What steps should
Good.
Muslims go through? to avail themselves for such responsibility?
Any qualified person in terms of, if you've had a degree, if you had some service, you can be an ambassador. But it takes very good language skills. It takes very good ability to communicate with people, ability to engage people. Importantly, when you study, for example, international relations, part of the strategic aspect, and that's this really for the Muslims, that if we think we want these positions and we want to go to the government and say we want a place where we need ambassadorial positions, as you're making appointments for ambassadors, Muslims as part of people in this country ought and must have a space in there. But we have to go and say we have got 50 people who have done international relations. We need to have the languages. Muslims are actually blessed in a lot of ways because we do a lot of languages. You start with Arabic, which becomes part of your prayer sessions, but beyond the prayer, it becomes a language that you can actually easily communicate in. So for people like you who have gone and studied in Arab countries, already you have the Arabic. People should learn. Ugandans as a whole, Muslims in particular, should learn as many languages as possible. I speak 12 languages. In the 12 languages that I speak, send me to any country, for example, within the region, and you will not have any doubt that I'll be able to represent my country because of the language. Language breaks barriers in ways that you cannot believe. You cannot get a person who cannot even speak Arabic. You send them to an Arab state because it is business and you think that's how it's going to work. There are other things that happen behind the scenes. The things that you see on the front desk are the very smaller, minutic things in comparison to the other things that happen outside that. So, and that's where I brought in, for example, the mosque. There are many people that we've bumped into at the mosque, and the conversation becomes easy to sort of generate from there. There are other places that you get meeting, and these are crucial beyond just the ambassadorial aspect of saying, just go for the official dinners where you have been invited. These are very, very crucial. So language skills important. Two, preparing to do international relations. That's a course that you can take. But there are also diplomatic trainings once a person has been identified, because even when the government takes its people, it takes them into a retreat and they will train them. They'll tell them, this is ABCD. As a diplomat, there are certain things you don't do. There are certain things you can't, you can't speak in this format. This is how you should carry yourself as an ambassador. But that can come with an appointment. And these things sort of work.
Great. And Sheikh Kassim Kaida, why would Muslims need this? Because you have explained how the country benefits from that, and you have explained why it is important for us to connect as ambassadors, and you need to send someone people will relate to, someone who will much be like Bilal.
Yes.
Because they would understand Bilal. They have a history with Bilal. They know he was a great companion of the Prophet and one of the scholars amongst the prophets. Actually, some of the greatest hadiths that we have, hadiths about riba.
Yes.
The hadith of what? So I believe Bilal has to be seen in that community. The historic and tradition culture setup has to recognize a Bilal. Now, a Bilal who is not a Muslim shall not connect with them as much as you would want.
Yes.
But now,
and there are these particular barriers, because there are times, in diplomacy when you find yourself in a difficult situation. There's a time I went to Rome. I was in Rome, and in the evening, the Pope had started programs where, for example, every Mondays and Wednesdays, I think, he would provide hot food for homeless people. So I ended up accidentally, purely by accident, I ended up in the St. Peter's Cathedral there. And that's the time that the Pope comes and blesses people, like holds people and prays for them. And I found myself in the square, I was in the square.
You were blessed.
I didn't know whether to run away from the blessing.
Sheikh Kassim Kaira, you were baptized. Jazakallah. All right, great.
But you see that I would have struggled, for example, if I'd gone to meet the Pope and I didn't have, for example, to kneel down and do the cross. But these are the realities that we have to deal with. So it would be easier to get a pure Madari person, a Catholic person, to go to Rome, to the Papa as the ambassador. Just like this, it should just be logical that in an Arab country, you have so many Muslims and Muslims with ability that would be able to deliver. And therefore, that's why I think it is very, very important that Muslims should now have a lobbying force a lobbying force that overlooks all these other differences of Chibuli, Nakasero, and Old Kampala, whatever, and you just
Mhm.
look at the Muslim component as an
Great.
element that needs to be part of government.
How do we benefit as Muslims?
The
Because that is a very
benefits
big
are
question.
huge because an ambassador, first of all, probably we need to see the context of what an ambassador does. An ambassador represents their country in that particular country where they have been sent. The first major priority is to represent the image of their country, to sell the image of their country. Now, a country like Uganda, for example, it has been agriculturally dependent for so many years. But now you have particular sectors that are opening up, sectors like tourism. Uganda has one of the biggest birds collections in the world. Most of the birds that come in out of Europe, winter time, they fly all the way. They come to Africa, but not everywhere in Africa. In Uganda and a specific area, around Rutembe Beach there is a particular area where birds of just specific birds will come and they just come there. Many bird watchers now have come there to come and be there for that. It has not been promoted well. The Uganda you still hear is the Uganda that was misrepresented in the name of Idi Amin, and the way they would say Idi Amin, was killing people, and that's the Uganda that people still have in their minds. They need to understand the Uganda that is now, beginning to open up. So tourism sector is big. People to come and build hotels that will be of a particular standard that people can feel comfortable with. So that
Yeah.
that is really like one area that an ambassador would do. So you can actually get investors. And during Dr. Rashid Semudu's time, for example, in Qatar and in the Gulf countries, there were
Yeah.
already efforts to try to bring some of these guys. I've been to Niger, and at one time I was there in Niger, and the princes of Saudi Arabia have actually they've loaned out a particular space where they just come to hunt. Every year they just come to hunt. The amount of money that they spend in their game hunting, because it's just prize hunting, they just come and it's fun for them.
Mhm.
It's a holiday thing. The amount of money that they spend when they come there is just unbelievable. These are things that we can, like if it's controlled, if it's clearly done, if it's well done. So an ambassador for getting an ambassador, one will give them access to these places, and that is important for themselves, for their own personal growth, but for their country at the same time, marketing the country and bringing investors to their country, but also finding opportunities for Uganda, because like now Uganda, you're encouraging people to farm, to do a lot of agriculture, for example. People are going into overproduction. The problem with agricultural products is once there is demand, then supply increases. When supply becomes too much, then the demand is not enough to filter that. There are huge losses and it creates demotivation for farmers. Can we not, for example, in the Arab world, you're going to have fruits are a big market. Uganda is endowed with fruits non-stop.
Yeah.
UK now, for example, with Brexit, after UK pulled out of the European Union, the
Mhm.
terms can be negotiated differently. So you have access market here. The amount of matoke that we consume here on a daily basis, just
Mhm.
as a little box of soap, ngaboro is a box here sabun,
Mhm.
costs £20. That is mitwaro kumi. Ejuviramu ebiwagu bisatu eby'amatoke. To imagine
Wow.
100, yes. And that's all it takes is mobilize the farmers back home, mobilize the mechanism of transportation, get the goods here. And this is the role of the ambassador, looking after the interests of Ugandans in those particular countries. You've
Yeah.
seen how our girls have suffered through the labor markets and all the problems that have happened with
Yeah.
domestic workers, especially in the Arab world. A strong ambassador, a strong embassy would be able to go behind the scenes if necessary to ensure that the lives and conditions of these people are bettered. An ambassador would be in a position like that. The embassies would need to be empowered to be able to deliver on those particular
Yeah.
services. And that is critical.
Great, great. Sheikh Kassim Kaida, thank you very much. We are many minutes down the road. We wish to send salam to everyone and respond to the salams on social media. Thank you, everyone, for watching. It seems people are enjoying everything that you're saying, Sheikh Kassim Kaida. I'm looking at these countries where you think Muslims should be ambassadors, like it would be better for Muslims to be ambassadors. Could you mention a few of them and why it is strategic for the government to select specifically Muslim ambassadors to these regions? Because of what you know as a journalist and because of what you know as a farmer as well, because I know you're working on a very big project.
Ambassadors should be able to be deployed anywhere. But the reason I brought the specificity of Muslims in this particular sense is knowing who Arabs are and how they operate. It would make a lot of logical sense for the government to deploy Muslim ambassadors in Muslim countries because, one, it breaks the barriers, but it will also be someone who can communicate in a language that these people understand. It's not just a question of a Muslim necessarily when they don't have the language skills or the means to be able to break the barriers for the
Yeah,
examples that we have just shown. So, for starters, yes, the Muslim countries, at least if Muslim ambassadors are sent there, that's a good start. But it does not go just to that. Muslims can be deployed in other countries as well because it's more about the skills. It's about your negotiation skills, your ability to attract investment, your ability to sell the image of the country. Because really, the first principal aspect of an ambassador is to improve the image of their country abroad. That's
yeah,
really like the starting point. And therefore, uh, we should start strategizing if they can get into these particular countries. If you start with the Arab countries and then spread out to the other countries, definitely I think it would be beneficial for the country. We should look at the bigger interests of the country and not just the individual aspects. And if we see people with skills, people who will be able to attract investment, and I think that is crucial now going forward because there is increasingly more less and less reliance on foreign aid as
yeah,
opposed to foreign investment. So you want a lot of foreign direct investment as opposed to foreign aid. Foreign aid is falling very much. And with COVID and its impact on many economies across the world, it's going even to be much, much harder for these countries to find the money that they were dishing out to those countries. So it
yeah,
means we just need to find investors who can come. Importantly, also, I think the ambassadors, and I had actually forgot this, is mobilizing the diaspora in those particular countries to be able to find investments that they can invest back home because
yep,
there are many Ugandans now who are abroad, but you find that they are operating, in very scattered circumstances. This makes it very difficult to do anything. It is important, therefore, that we find a mechanism, we find a way around how to mobilize the diaspora. Actually, the diaspora, especially following this particular election and the role that the diaspora has played, it has become very clear that if it was about mobilization of funds, for example, investment in projects, if you had a very well mobilized diaspora, you can actually do a lot of things back home with a very short period of time. We've seen projects that we've worked on. For example, there's an orphanage that needs building or a mosque or whatever. 1 hour and enough money has been collected to kick off the project. These are things that we can do. And with diasporas growing, definitely, I think countries like Uganda now should be starting to refocus on the diaspora and see how to best make use of them. And the ambassadors appointed in those particular countries are going to be critical. If you have countries like Sweden, Denmark, United Kingdom, US, where you've had a lot of strong opposition, you need a strong ambassador, but one that can break through to the diaspora, have an open
yeah.
conversation, and that can help a lot.
Yeah, I saw a post. I don't know if you saw it somewhere. One of the I can't really say I know for a fact that the minister said it, but he was like, those in the diaspora will have to start paying NSSF because if they can support the opposition, then let us use some of their money to grow our country.
Well, but you cannot pay NSSF when there is no income that can be seen. So,
Yeah,
and part of the problem is we are already paying a lot of money through transfer fees. In fact, this is where now the government even has to start looking into some of the deals they have entered, especially with the big companies like Western Union and MoneyGram. Those exclusivity deals have to be gotten rid of and renegotiated. There is need for countries to create because you end up doing a double taxation. You are earning money that has already been taxed, and then for you to transfer money, it's taxed again. You're taxed doubly, and I don't think that is fair for the hardworking person. So
yeah,
government should actually, on the other hand, be looking at alternative ways of how to open up that. The more the money that comes into the economy, the more the expenditure capacity, the spending power of people will improve. So where the government might not take money from the source in terms of the money entering in, it will still get the money on people purchasing fuel, on people buying the land, on people buying, driving cars. All that actually is a benefit that incrementally comes through. So they should be clever with the taxation because sometimes governments are so keen on widening the tax base, but widening the tax base by squeezing a very poor population, and therefore you find that the benefits don't come out of that. So you could actually be clever about it, allow more money to come in, let it filter through the population. That increases the burden on people.
wonderful, wonderful. Sheikh Kassim Kaida, up to now, it is beautiful information that you've shared with us. I don't even know how you feel about yourself right now. You're
Right.
blessed, Alhamdulillah. May Allah just increase on your knowledge.
Alhamdulillah, Rabbil
uh,
Alamin. No,
uh, 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 you got me thinking that from our talk right now and this conversation, it's clear that the government has to take deliberate decisions and actions to involve Muslims in diplomacy. And it is also clear that Muslims have a role to play. I'm wondering if you can just tell us from your own experience, what should Muslims do to help the government?
well, part of it is to, this is really something that I keep singing about. Hopefully, at some point, it will make sense. It
Mhm.
is about having a Muslim think tank, an organization, a body that will come out and strategize on what we want next. We have so many people that have got skills, but we don't know where they are. You need to have a sort of a data bank that will be able to collect and establish who is who and where they are. So that when we get to saying to the government, these are the positions we would like to have, we have the evidence to reflect on that. So we're saying to the government, here are the people. We are looking for ambassadors. When ambassadorial positions come up, Your Excellency, this is so and so. They've lived in this country for this number of years. I was very surprised by the number of professors and people that I've seen on these Zoom sessions lately. People that have lived, like, for example, in Canada for 20 years. Perfect. I mean, people
Yeah.
really like very well educated, like people like Sheikh Yunus Lurega. You just look at his experience starting in Egypt and then crossing, coming. The world view of such people is unbelievable. A person like Imam Kasozi, I wouldn't want, for example, to be appointed as ambassador because that would have taken him away from the ground where things have to be mobilized. So you need to have
Yeah.
another person that would mobilize the other side and then bring it. In fact, the role of the ambassador in best Uganda would be Omusasi. Yeah, asakile guanganye, because you just go get it where it is and bring it where it is supposed to be. And I think that really that's where we should be thinking about. A person who has very good negotiation skills to be able to negotiate with governments. Most of these governments need people that can be convincing, but you don't just convince with your tongue. These people want facts. So we need that factual, and the only way you can build that fact is when you have a data bank. And that's where, for
Mhm.
example, this Muslim think tank would be able to sit down and say, in the next 5 years, how many doctors do we need? Let us push parents now and about applying medicine. How many people, we don't want our women to be touched by men, in gynecological clinics and so on, whether they're going to give birth. How many female, because it doesn't matter whether they are Muslim, but if it was a Muslim, even better, but so you're saying now, I would like a woman to be treated by a woman, especially when it comes to issues of gynecology, in such areas. We target and we say, how long does it take to train a gynecologist? 5 years. We target, we say, in the next 5 years, inshallah, next election, we should have a presentation of saying, these are the gynecologists that we have and we want them in these particular hospitals. That is practical, that is feasible. So Muslims, what they can contribute is really beginning to build up that data bank so quickly. Let people who are out there in the diaspora, people in Uganda who have studied and probably have crossed professions, come in and share this information so that we know who is who. When you know who is who, then you know where to allocate who. And that is actually what would be the maximization or utilization of resources. We have scarce resources. The best way is to optimally utilize them. And the only way to do that, of course, is if we go down this route.
Thank you very much. Sheikh Kassim Kaida, for some reason, it always has to come back to the Muslim think tank. Could you
Mm.
give us at least your views and thoughts on how it could be constructed? Like, how can we easily set up such an institution in your
Well,
in your?
it does not need to be physical as in placed wherever. It's really a concept. And once you have a concept, it's about picking clever people from the different aspects. The late Dr. Anas Karisa had started on this, and he was actually had already registered a research center, something, and that's one that we want to pick up with Haj Karim Karisa, and we see how to push forward. Because now that is already a registered entity, it sets the precedent that we can start from that. But importantly, it's about pooling resources, Muslim resources from the different areas of our interests and getting their views. The policies that we develop there can even be submitted to the Muslim caucus in parliament as a lobby group to go and work on laws that would impact on Muslims in those particular ways. So the think tank already can start influencing parliament. The think tank can start influencing government when it comes to appointment of cabinets. And it should be impartial. It should really cut across. It should not be Chiburi or World Kampala or Nakasero. It should be a Muslim think tank. And it is possible if you get people, for example, as for me, I never have any issue. I'll go to Old Kampala and I'll pray. I'll go to Tibiri and I pray. I'll go to Nakasero and I never feel like any of my prayers had really been short in quality because I've prayed in one and not the other. So some of these things are ideological. And if people are there, people can keep in that. But I think for a younger generation, for a generation going forward, we need really to empty ourselves of these burdens that our parents carried. We need to look at Islam in the bigger picture, in the going into the 21st century, 22nd century. What do we have? What have we put in place that could really, like give us what we want? And I think that's the most important thing at this moment in time. So the think tank really, I think, would act as a guide. It would start to develop policy, to develop ideas that can then be used to benefit Muslims as a whole. Looking at all these different aspects, including the diaspora, which I think now is a very important component of whatever we are doing.
Yeah, I have seen that. I mean, I have seen the role of the diaspora in many things. I mean, we've done things when UMA connected. We've done things on the UMC, and I mean, there is a lot of good being done by the diaspora Muslim community and by the diaspora community in general. I
Mm.
think we cannot exclude this. For some reason, when people get out of Uganda, they learn to love it. I mean, this is a true fact. People at home
Yeah.
in Uganda think that Uganda is not lovable, but when you look at when you get out of Uganda, you realize how
Mhm.
much and how beautiful and how many I mean how much resources and everything that we have back at home that could be utilized because now you're exposed. This is why we need to count on these who have traveled, and I can't emphasize enough the role of traveling because it is in the Quran, it is in the Hadith. Just go out there and something shifts in your mind. And when it shifts, that is a million pound shift. You can definitely bring some good life. For example, I've been exposed to sheikhs like Sheikh Kassim Kaida. I mean, I didn't know Sheikh Kassim Kaida, but now we're discussing issues that concern our country and our community. I find the diaspora a very, very critical issue to consider in everything that we do. So that is Sheikh Kassim Kaida trying to tell us how much we need to push for this think tank and giving us a few tips on how to achieve that. I like the idea that it is already registered, and Dr.
Yes.
Karisa rahimahullah had already registered something like that. I'm with you on this campaign, and you know that, and we call upon every Muslim to support this campaign because we really need it. There was an argument, someone was asking me that, but Sheikh, how can we unite all the Muslims when there is these hills in Uganda?
Mm.
Which hill do you go to? Eh? Are you in Kawempe? Are you in Chivuri? Are you in Old Kampala? And I was like, if we cannot unite the hills, we can build above them. I don't know what you think about that.
No, but sometimes I think we worry too much. And what I've learned, what I've through experience, is to wait to have everybody on board. You might never start off. Start with a nucleus of people who are like-minded. And if you have like-minded people, embark on those. Many of our people are doubting Thomases, if I may use the word. They take their time, first of all, to see something that has picked up and then they join. When, for example, Honorable Robert Chaguranyi started with his idea, before it even became MOOP, it was more people power, people power. That's what it was. Some people were sort of doubtful. They had, like they could not see it really turning into something. Then momentum picked and you started seeing the bandwagon that kind of joined. The same goes to President Museveni himself when he started with his rebellion, like 35 years ago. It goes back to the same thing. It was only 27 people that really believed in him, and then all of a sudden you build it up to what it became. People sometimes take their time to see, but what you need is a strong nucleus. The moment you have a good nucleus, the nucleus really becomes the foundation upon which you're going to build a bigger view. If you start making statements, and we have the opportunity. What social media has done now is expose us to give us access to rooms that we've never had access to. Don't be surprised, for example, if a government official, senior government official, including the president, could even easily tune into Soul Cocktail if someone flagged it and said there's a big conversation going on. And he would just come and log on and, they come and follow. It is amazing how much can be attained out there. You no longer need the appointments that you had to kneel down at someone to get access to the president. There are these old channels that he actually watches because he needs to inform himself. So these are opportunities that can be harvested, and by that, it provides an opportunity then to sort of be able to start, get the right team, get the people who really are focused, who want something, who want to achieve something, then embark on that. Once you have that, then actually everything else, comes and falls into place. And I think that is critical. So we do not have to worry about the hills and so on. No, Kampala was built on 7 hills. Right now, if you said Kampala of 7 hills, everybody would laugh at you. We are talking about 32 hills at the moment. So if you were going to really stick to 7, then 32 wouldn't be making sense, or 25. So we could actually add more hills, if anything. And we just keep, just
I
keep it.
like that.
Because from a hill, you can easily see another hill as
Yeah,
opposed to being in the valley. So don't
yeah,
allow ourselves to go in the valley. Let's just get another hill. And, it's a country of hills.
yeah,
An
yeah.
example like that would be much easier in a country like Rwanda because it's the country of 1,000 hills. It's hills over hills, and therefore it wouldn't be even a problem. But I think that's where we need to start strategizing. We need to be strategic, get a good, strong nucleus group that sets the foundation. And then once they see you serious and delivering, the next thing is people will listen. And I think that is crucial.
Thank you very much. I encourage everyone who is viewing, whether live or you're viewing later, please tag anyone you think is important and will like this topic, because right now what is happening is that we are starting a movement, and we are strongly advocating for this institute, because this is how we start helping the government, suggesting real potential diplomats. I mean, we do not know them right now. We know a few of them. If we get a little more organized, I believe we can do something here. But now we need a source. We need a place where everyone in positions of power, everyone with authority, goes to look for scholars in Sharia, for scholars in public administration, for diplomats, for we are very organized, and we need. There is this idea, Sheikh Kassim, I don't know what you think about it, making it compulsory, or creating a certain kind of certification that if you're a Muslim and you're not registered in this think tank, then you're likely to be left out. We need to create a certain kind of authority, not trying to monopolize the opportunities, but it should be something that every Muslim, wherever you are, you have to sign into this with your potential and every detail of whatever you've done. Why? Because we need to know who you are. Um, I don't want us to because I was going to suggest the role of the imam and the mosque in identifying who is a Muslim and who is not.
Your line just froze there. I don't know if you can see me. Your line seems like it's frozen. Hello? You froze there, Sheikh Ashraf. I missed what you're saying there.
How about now? Can you see
Yeah,
me?
now I can see
Am
you,
I
but
back?
you just froze
Yeah,
for a couple of seconds. Yes.
yeah. It shows me here that my internet connection got disturbed a little
All
bit.
right. Okay.
I hope I'm back. I
Yeah.
was saying that we might not go to examine a lot the think tank, but we wanted to throw the idea out there and
Mm,
to tell everyone that we are working on it. And but we shall hold and dedicate a specific session or specific sessions discussing this particular think
concept.
tank. But
Yeah.
now we are talking about it in respect to how it can help us help the government
Yeah.
avail these potential Muslims who can represent the country all over the world, but also people who can speak the Arabic language,
Mm,
so they can represent the country very well in the Middle East and the Arab countries. I have studied in the Arab countries, Sheikh Kassim, and I have seen how they connect so much. with someone who speaks their language,
Yeah.
and they connect so much with someone who prays with them. Because one thing that people should understand about the Muslim prayer is that it is toe by toe,
Shoulder to shoulder.
shoulder to shoulder. We pray together. And what happens when we say salam? We just salam alaikum. So you look at who is here and we look at who is here. There is some kind of bonding. Actually, many things start in the mosque and end in the mosque. Yes, there are these offices, but someone you prayed with, and this is how the Arabs build their communities. They literally know everyone who prays at the mosque and their houses and what they do and their children. Even in the parks in the city where their children play, they know each other, they know everyone. Now, you are an ambassador who doesn't pray with them, they will not kind of trust you. And because we are not looking at the religion as religion, we are looking for someone who will connect with those individuals to kusaka. You said Muluganda, it is kusaka, to bring all this good to the country. I think that is
And I
something.
think also, Sheikh Ashraf, importantly, it's not just a Muslim for Muslim's sake or a person who can just speak Arabic. No, we need a person with capacity, the person that can deliver. And there are many out there who have the capacity. But the only way you know someone's capacity is if you've given them an opportunity to be able to show their capacity.
I like
A lot
that.
of people sit on potential and their potential is unused simply because it has not been tapped. So it's a question of seeing, and there's always evaluation. An ambassador normally stays for 2 to 5 years, ordinarily 2 to 5 years, and another 3 to 5 years. So if you think about it, within that period of time, if a person really hasn't made an impact, there are ambassadors who have stayed in particular areas for longer than that, and sometimes it's about their ability to deliver. If someone is
Yeah.
delivering, the English will say, if it ain't broken, why fix it? So it goes that if someone is delivering, you just go ahead. You go with the flow, and you benefit from this person. So there would be yardsticks. When an ambassador is being sent out, they'll tell them what is expected of them, and if they don't deliver, then definitely they will lose the position. But if you have a bank from where you're just speaking, you say, we have lost this one, give us another one, we have another one. So that's what I mean. That's really what this think tank is about. It will be able to avail what is not available in that particular sense.
Mashallah, Sheikh Kassim Kaira, we are almost left with
Yeah,
only
I can
15
see
minutes,
it's
and I,
2 minutes.
I, I, I just need to put it back to you now.
Mm.
What do you think we have not talked about in this session, and it is important?
Well, I think we seem to have touched on those in terms of diplomacy. It's important that as Muslims, then we start strategizing just to make sure we have the right people for the right positions. Uh, then we can actually, like start pushing for that. But I think really it's about engaging the government. It will be easier to engage the government, not as factions, but as a community. And that's very important. So this think tank could actually constitute, because the president, given his many years, for example, has been dealing with Muslims, and whichever president, even if it's not President Museveni, even if it's another president, when they come in, they'll continue to deal with Muslims in the factionalization that they have been in.
Yeah,
And for you to be better off, these factions can be there, but then the think tank can also come in as a new element. And the strength of that actually would be that it will be the only force that can represent all of them, but from a tactical point. And that's
yeah,
that's where the issue, that's where its power really, really lies.
yeah.
Yeah.
Great, great, great. Thank you very much. I don't know if there are some comments here you've seen. Most people have been appreciating. I have seen some of my friends from Djibouti, Aramis, and I saw one of my friends from Somalia right now, and there is someone else from Cote d'Ivoire. Okay.
And
Uh,
Germany.
yeah.
Germany, there is Germany there.
Yeah, there is Germany.
Mm.
We have been and we are still discussing until we finish our 1 hour the
Uh,
role of Muslims in
just
diplomacy.
4 minutes in, Sheikh, I think. We are three
Yeah,
minutes to the time.
yeah, I understand. I
Yeah,
would wish to keep Sheikh Kasim Kaida longer because I believe the more we stay with him, the more we mine. He's some mine of knowledge and wisdom,
I
and I
agree.
personally find comfort in having the opportunity to host you on this show, because right now we have just talked about diplomacy, and these are not topics that we discuss often in our community. which
Yeah.
is really sad because you cannot really create role models or provide guidance and facilitate people's thinking without having to discuss such issues. So we encourage every Muslim out there to get involved in this kind of work. In becoming a diplomat, you can really do a lot of good work, and it is not anti-Islamic. It is not a job you take up and you be like, okay, and inil hukm illa lillah, and you start disturbing your mind that you're doing haram or halal. This is a good thing, representing a nation in another nation and making sure that
In
the
fact,
nation.
Sheikh Ashraf, you're asking what we probably hadn't touched on, and it just crossed my mind that as I'm wrapping up, I have 2 minutes to go.
All right.
One thing that is really that we didn't touch very much is I only mentioned one ambassador, Dr. Semudu, like when I was making references. But you look at the Muslim ambassadors and the kind of impact they've had, the few that we have had, and how many. There is Haji Sekono who had just died, who was at the OIC. The level of impact that he made when it came to the OIC, to the Islamic country, Islamic conference, and what actually the contribution, the amount of money that Uganda receives from the Islamic Development Bank, interest free every year, you know, unbelievable. And the membership of that was on the basis of the fact that someone took diplomacy to a level where he recognized the importance, and that was Idi Amin, and took Uganda to the Organization of Islamic Conference. Uganda is still benefiting from that, despite the fact that it is predominantly Christian. So those are benefits. It's not money to the Muslims, it's money to Uganda. You
Yep.
look at Haji Chinene, who was ambassador to the United States of America during Idi Amin's time. You see the impact that he made there. The late Hajj Aziz Kasuja, when he was ambassador in Saudi Arabia. This is where actually the importance of religion comes in. When Hajj Aziz Kasuja was in Makkah, was in Saudi Arabia as ambassador, the Hujjaj, Ugandan pilgrims who would go there, when they had issues with where to sleep, when they had issues with whatever, the ambassador would go and move all the way to Mina and go to the Haram. A non-Muslim can never enter Makkah, and you know that, for sure. A
Yeah.
non-Muslim will not be allowed. So, whether they are ambassadors or not, they cannot enter Makkah. That limits their level of intervention. These are the things that you need to be thinking through as a president, as an appointing authority when you're nominating people. Hajj
Yeah.
Aziz Kasuja went there. He would go and stay with the Hujjaj, like make them comfortable in terms of their stay. Sheikh Mzata, the late Mzata, would go with delegations. Sheikh Kenya, the people who take Muslims from Uganda, they would get there. Having an ambassador there to sort of stand and say, this is where ABCD goes, makes a huge difference. And that's, like you cannot start ignoring those particular elements. And they
Yeah.
come into the bigger picture. You need to start thinking. Look at Sheikh Sure, Muhammad Sure.
Yeah.
Famous in
And
Saudi
also the
Arabia.
late Ambassador Senyomo, I believe you understand.
Yes, look at Dr. Chisule in Saudi Arabia and then on into Iran with whatever the dynamics were. Then bring Dr. Samud. You find that there have been few and far between, but their impact has been huge to the community. And therefore,
Yeah.
that's why it is really, really important that as the appointing authorities, they have to be thinking about these dynamics and including them as part of their policy.
Thank you very much. What
Assalamu
else can I
alaikum.
add on that message? I mean, the message is really good. And like, as usual, we thank Sheikh Kaira for being here for all these minutes. And we thank everyone who has been following with us. Thanks for your comments. Please keep on tagging everyone you think this conversation would interest them, such that they can see it. It has been a message to the government, a message to the Muslim community, a message to everyone who is concerned that Muslims should get involved in diplomacy, and it is an Islamic thing, and it has to be seen like that there are some areas that Muslims could do better than their brothers and sisters from other religious uh, denominations. But also, Sheikh Kassim Kaida, we have established that it is about quality. It's not just about the language, or I'm a son of so and so, I'm Muhammad, I'm Ashraf. It is about the potential and how much you can deliver the service to the people. Thank you very much, Sheikh Kasim Kaida. I don't know if you have one last statement to tell
Uh,
our people.
Well, just to thank you very much for having me on, and I hope whoever has watched, I think, will have a view and it can help if it helps change someone's mind
Yeah.
even better, because then probably will have contributed to the bigger debate that is still ongoing. Barakallahu fikum. Thank you very
Fikum,
much for having me
fikum,
on.
barakallah, jazakallah khairan, Sheikh Qasim, and thank you everyone. Till next Friday, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa